Amid the golden splendor of Rome, where power and desire burned like molten fire, one man chose a different path. He did not conquer the world with swords, but with wisdom and stillness. While empires chased glory, he sat beneath the cold night sky, conversing with his own soul. And from that silence, Meditations was born, a book that promised no fame, but showed how to keep peace within chaos. More than 2 millennia later, his words still echo like the whisper of reason in a world of noise, reminding us, power may crumble, but virtue never dies. Amid the golden splendor of the Roman Empire, where power and ambition flowed like rivers of molten lava, there was a man who chose a different path. He did not seek glory in victory or the roar of the crowds, but in silence. In the long nights on the battlefield, he wrote to remind himself to live with reason and virtue. That man was Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher-emperor, who left humanity the book Meditations, a legacy not only of Stoic philosophy, but of what it means to be human amid the storms of life. Meditations was never meant to be published. It was a dialogue between a man and his own soul. In its pages, we find not the pride of an emperor, but the honesty of someone wrestling with fear, anger, desire, and the heavy weight of responsibility. Marcus never tried to teach anyone. He simply wrote reminders to himself that power is fleeting, fame is illusion, and the only thing a person can truly master is their own mind. In a world consumed by chaos, he chose to remain calm, like a quiet flame, steady and enduring, bright, but never destructive. What makes Meditations timeless is not its philosophy, but its humanity. It touches the essence of our existence, loneliness, helplessness, and the yearning for meaning. Marcus Aurelius did not write as a ruler addressing his people, but as a human being asking himself, am I living in accordance with reason? Am I treating others with kindness? Am I allowing my mind to be dragged by things that don't matter? In those questions, readers from every generation recognize themselves. Remarkably, Meditations was written during the most turbulent years of the Roman Empire, when Marcus faced wars, plagues, rebellions, and betrayal. Yet amid the ruins of his time, he turned inward in search of peace. While the world sought to conquer the outside, he sought to govern the inside. That contrast is what made Marcus the embodiment of Stoicism, a man who stood firm in the storm, knowing that the only thing we truly own is our response to what happens. And that is why, more than 2 millennia later, his words still echo in our modern world, where humans, though no longer fighting with swords and shields, continue to battle daily with anxiety, fear, and loneliness. Meditations is not just the legacy of a Roman philosopher. It is a mirror for every soul today, reminding us that even as the world changes, the principles of peace remain the same. Live with reason, act with kindness, and accept what lies beyond your control. Marcus Aurelius was not a philosopher born in the quiet halls of a library or in the secluded schools of thought. He was an emperor who lived among the clash of swords, where every decision could mean the loss of thousands of lives. That is why Meditations is not merely a work of philosophy. It is a spiritual map, a guide written by a leader searching for light amid darkness. In every line, we witness a great soul wrestling between two worlds, duty and freedom, reason and emotion, power and humanity. He understood that an emperor does not rule only by law, but by the calmness of his mind. For when the mind falters, the empire trembles. What Marcus wrote in Meditations were reminders to himself, but they became an invaluable gift to all generations. He wrote about waking up each morning to face the world. Today, I shall meet people who are selfish, deceitful, and ungrateful. Yet I cannot let them make me like them. Beneath those words lies not just tolerance, but the art of mastering oneself amid life's contradictions. Marcus did not teach us how to escape adversity. He taught us how to live within it while preserving our dignity. He never promised a better world. He showed us how to become better people in the world as it is. The Stoic philosophy that Marcus followed was not one of cold detachment, but of awareness. It did not demand the suppression of emotion. It taught understanding and control. When Marcus said we cannot control what happens, only how we respond, he was describing true freedom, the kind no one can take away. While many see freedom as the right to do whatever they want, Marcus saw it as the strength to remain unshaken by desire, fear, or anger. And that is the essence of inner power, silent but steadfast, like a rock standing firm in a stormy sea. What is truly remarkable is that, despite ruling the vast Roman Empire, Marcus Aurelius lived a simple and humble life. He slept on a wooden bed, ate modestly, and shunned excess, believing that all external things are fleeting illusions. While other emperors carved their names into stone, Marcus carved his thoughts into pages. He knew that true glory does not come from conquering others, but from conquering oneself. The victory of not letting desire control you, fame blind you, or hatred consume your soul. It is this victory that made him immortal, even after his body turned to dust. Today, in an age of anxiety, chaos, and disorientation, the spirit of Stoicism that Marcus Aurelius planted is needed more than ever. For every modern person, though without a crown, is an emperor of their own life, governing emotions, managing reason, and facing storms that rise from within. Meditations reminds us that the greatest power is not in controlling others, but in controlling ourselves. And in a world spinning wildly between desire and fear, his words shine brighter than ever, like a torch lighting the path back to inner peace. When reading Meditations, you realize Marcus Aurelius did not write to impress. He wrote to survive. Not to survive the battlefield outside, but the one within his own mind. His words are not lofty philosophy, but medicine for the soul. His way of confronting pain, loss, and loneliness. Even an emperor, standing atop the world, had sleepless nights of reflection, wrestling with the same questions every human has asked. Why do I live? What can I control? What truly matters? It is this honesty that makes Meditations timeless, for it speaks not of one man's power, but of humanity's shared fragility and resilience. In Meditations, Marcus often wrote about death, not as something to fear, but as an inseparable part of life. He reminded himself, live as if today were your last, but act as if you would live forever. These are not words of despair, but of profound wisdom, from a man who understood that everything tangible is fleeting, and only virtue endures. By accepting death, Marcus found freedom. By accepting loss, he found peace. That is the essence of true Stoicism, not resisting fate, but aligning with it, mastering one's response to the inevitable. What sets Marcus apart from other philosophers is that he didn't just speak his philosophy, he lived it. During Rome's Great Plague, instead of retreating behind palace walls, Marcus walked among his people, sharing food, comforting soldiers, and caring for the sick. He was not only a thinker, but a moral example, a ruler who acted as a citizen first. That is why he was often called the last emperor of the Republic, because even in absolute power, he lived with humility and civic virtue. always placing the common good above himself. His life embodied his own belief. Human happiness lies in living in harmony with nature and reason. The Stoicism Marcus practiced was not a philosophy of withdrawal, but of engagement. It did not ask people to escape the world. It taught them how to live within it without being consumed by it. When he wrote that, "The wise man is like a rock before the storm," he was not preaching indifference, but describing inner strength, the power to remain human even when everything around you falls apart. In today's world, where people are trapped in endless noise, comparison, and the pursuit of validation, that wisdom feels more vital than ever. Amid the storm of information and distraction, only those who can stand still will truly see the current of life. Marcus Aurelius did not intend to write for others, yet he wrote for all time. Every generation since has found in Meditations the echo of its own voice, the struggle to remain calm in a world of chaos. In our modern age, haunted by invisible fears, climate change, technological upheaval, and spiritual isolation, Meditations has become a compass to help us navigate uncertainty. It reminds us, we cannot control the world, but we can control our mind. We cannot stop the storm, but we can stand firm within it. And perhaps, in that silent strength, humanity still has a chance to not lose itself. Within the pages of Meditations, one can feel the breath of a man who was both philosopher and warrior. Marcus Aurelius did not write from the safety of an ivory tower. He wrote his words of philosophy amidst the cold winds and the smell of blood on the northern frontier, as the Roman Empire struggled against endless invasions. It is only within that setting that we truly grasp the weight of his words. They were not luxurious reflections, but survival codes, guiding the human spirit when the world around him was collapsing. Meditations was born in fire and chaos, yet it carries a soft, steady light, the light of serenity that shines only from a soul that has conquered itself. Marcus understood that no one can escape suffering. He did not seek to run from pain, but to observe and accept it. In passages that echo with meditative calm, he reminded himself, "Everything that happens is ordained by nature. The only task I have is to act rightly within what is mine to control." Here, Stoicism reaches its purest form, not in changing the world, but in changing how we see it. To Marcus, pain was not an enemy, but a teacher. And through every page of Meditations, he offers modern humanity a simple but profound truth. We cannot choose our circumstances, but we can always choose our response. For Marcus, philosophy was never a path to glory. It was a path to freedom. He saw philosophy as the art of living, where reason is the lamp that illuminates all action. He believed the wise person is one who lives according to nature, meaning to live honestly, kindly, and in harmony with others. Even as an emperor, he refused to let cruelty or arrogance define him, for he knew that status does not determine worth. Character does. When he wrote, "Do not let the crown make you forget that you are a man," he was speaking not only to himself, but to every leader who would follow, reminding them that power only matters when it serves compassion. The Stoicism Marcus lived by was not a philosophy of cold detachment, but one of rational love. It taught people not to be ruled by emotion, but not to reject it either. Emotion, after all, is part of our nature. The key is to guide it toward goodness. When Marcus said, "Love those who make you suffer, for they help you train your soul," he was not defending weakness. He was revealing the greatest human strength, the ability to turn pain into understanding and anger into compassion. In today's competitive world, where kindness is often seen as vulnerability, that lesson resounds louder than ever. Only those who can master themselves are strong enough to love others. In an age where the rush of modern life pulls us away from silence, meditation stands as an anchor for the restless mind. It is not just a book. It is a companion for long nights of doubt, a quiet voice whispering that everything will pass, and that peace of mind is the only true foundation. Perhaps that is Marcus's eternal gift to the world, a timeless reminder that greatness is not in conquering the outer world, but in conquering the inner one. When one reaches the final pages of Meditations, it becomes clear that Marcus Aurelius did not write to display his intellect, but to guard himself against corruption. In the highest seat of power, where every word he spoke could become law, he never allowed himself to forget the limits of being human. Each day, he reminded himself that fame, power, and wealth would all fade away like sand slipping through one's fingers. "All things will be forgotten," he wrote. "Only virtue is worth preserving." These are the words of a man who had stood upon the highest peak of the world and realized that no summit truly exists if one cannot rule over one's own mind. Marcus once wrote, "Look at each thing as if you were seeing it for the first and the last time." The line seems simple, yet it carries a profound philosophy of awareness. When we realize how fragile everything is, we begin to live more fully, more gently, and with less anger and greed. To him, life was like a river, whether its waters rushed or flowed quietly. The goal was not to control it, but to learn to move with it peacefully. That is why Marcus never resented fate. He understood that the universe has its own order, and true happiness comes only when one lives in harmony with that order. Death, for him, was not an end, but a transformation. A dewdrop dissolving at dawn to return to the vast ocean. What makes Meditations timeless is its healing power. In a world increasingly lost and anxious, where people are suffocated by pressure, distraction, and invisible fears, we chase illusions and seek happiness in distant places, forgetting that peace already lives within us. More than 2,000 years ago, Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Your peace comes not from controlling others, but from controlling yourself." A short sentence, yet powerful enough to change a life if one truly listens. For within every human being lies a battlefield where reason and emotion collide, and only when reason prevails do we find true freedom. The Stoic philosophy Marcus left behind is not detached from life. It is medicine for the weary soul in a noisy world. It teaches us to pause, to listen, to accept what cannot be changed, and to focus on what we can make better. While the world obsesses over success and speed, Stoicism reminds us that sometimes the greatest strength lies not in moving fast, but in stopping at the right moment, so we do not lose ourselves. And perhaps it is in that moment of stillness that we can finally hear the voice of the soul, the same voice Marcus Aurelius spent his life conversing with. Thus, Meditations is more than a book. It is a mirror reflecting the essence of humanity. It shows that in every age, in every person, whether at the height of glory or the depths of despair, there is the same longing for peace. And to find it, we need neither a throne nor a miracle, only the courage to look within. Marcus Aurelius may have been an emperor, but in these writings, he was simply a man learning how to be human. And it is precisely that honesty that makes Meditations an immortal legacy, not of the Roman Empire, but of the human soul. When we read Meditations in the context of the 21st century, the miracle is that Marcus Aurelius's words still resonate as if they were written for our time. The modern world is full of comfort, technology, light, and speed. Yet the human mind has never been more restless. We are pulled into endless races, to prove ourselves, to compete, to be seen. Meanwhile, Marcus, a Roman emperor from 2,000 years ago, tells us to do the opposite. Stop, turn inward, master the mind before trying to master the world. And it is precisely this paradox that makes meditations the perfect compass for the modern age, an era where humankind can conquer the stars, but still struggles to conquer itself. What is astonishing about Marcus is that he never preaches like a priest. He writes like someone trying to heal. He doesn't teach us how to escape emotions, but how to face them without fear. He wrote, "If something external causes you pain, remember, it is not the thing itself that hurts you, but your judgment of it." This is the deepest core of Stoic wisdom. All suffering begins in the mind, and only the mind can heal it. Once we understand this, we are no longer destroyed by words, betrayal, or loss, because we realize that no one can hurt us unless we allow them to. And in that moment of realization, we become free. Marcus Aurelius lived through the darkest years of the Roman Empire. Pandemics, wars, uprisings everywhere. He saw the depths of chaos, but also the heights of human strength. Amid all that, he chose to write, not to complain, but to keep his mind from drowning in despair. That is why Meditations is more than a philosophical text. It is the diary of a resilient soul, proof that even when everything collapses, a person can still remain dignified if they rule their thoughts. It's a lesson for every age, because the world will always have storms. The only difference is that today, most of them come from within. At a deeper level, Meditations is a call to return to nature. Marcus believed that peace comes only when we live in harmony with the universe, when we realize we are just a small part of the vast current of life. He wrote, "The universe is a river, its events are waves. What comes passes away, but the flow remains." That simple, profound image is medicine for the industrial age, an age where people think they can detach from, control, or even replace nature. Marcus reminds us that every attempt to defy nature's rhythm brings suffering, because happiness is not found in mastering the world, but in flowing with it. And perhaps the most miraculous thing is this: even after 2,000 years, Meditations still makes readers feel deeply understood. The pain, hope, loneliness, and longing to live authentically that Marcus wrestled with are still the struggles of the modern soul. He does not speak in the language of antiquity, but in the language of the heart. Be kind, be calm, love life as it is. And in a world so full of anxiety, that may be the very message humanity needs most, to remember that no matter how times change, the path to peace remains the same. Know yourself, master your mind, and live with reason and compassion. What makes Marcus Aurelius truly extraordinary is not only what he wrote, but the way he lived every word of it. Throughout his life, he reminded himself to act justly, even when the world was unjust, to remain kind, even when betrayed, and to stay calm, even when everything around him was falling apart. He once wrote, "If someone can show me that I am wrong, I will gladly change, because I seek the truth, not victory." That line reveals a rare greatness, humility. In a world where power often breeds arrogance, Marcus Aurelius stood as proof that the strongest person is not the one who commands others, but the one who listens to his own conscience. In his final years, as his health declined, as his friends passed away one by one, and as wars continued to rage, Marcus kept writing Meditations. He wrote not to teach others, but to keep his spirit from sinking into exhaustion, to remind himself that every breath was a gift. Some passages contain only a few words, yet they hold immense serenity. Do not complain about life. Be grateful that you are alive to learn. That is not a shallow piece of advice, but the distilled wisdom of a mind that endured deep suffering and still found peace. In a world obsessed with comfort, Marcus reminds us that true peace does not come from avoiding pain, but from understanding and accepting it. One of the most powerful images in Meditations is when Marcus compares life to a play, and each person to a temporary actor. He wrote, "You cannot choose your role, but you can choose how to perform it." That idea reshapes how we see the world. It teaches us to stop blaming fate, to stop complaining about circumstance, and to live fully in the role we have been given. Whether rich or poor, powerful or humble, anyone can live nobly if they perform their role with honesty and kindness. For Marcus, that was the art of living, to make every action, every thought, a quiet proof of virtue. The Stoicism Marcus practiced was not distant or abstract. It was woven into everyday life. He taught that we do not need to wait for perfect conditions to do what is right, because life will never be perfect. If you cannot change the world, change yourself. If you cannot make others love, be the one who loves first. These words are not resignation. They are a call to action, a wake-up call in an age where people constantly blame their circumstances. They remind us that true power lies not in control, but in acceptance. When we accept, we are no longer victims of fate. We walk beside it. More than 2,000 years later, in a world shaken by chaos, Marcus's words still shine like a lamp in the dark. In a society obsessed with status, he reminds us of simplicity. In an age of endless noise, he reminds us of silence. In times when people lose faith in one another, he reminds us of compassion. Meditations is not a relic of the past. It is the voice of the present, calling us to stop, to look inward, and to remember that happiness is not about having more, but needing less. And perhaps, in that simplicity, humanity may once again find the path to the peace Marcus Aurelius once walked. One of the most profound gifts Meditations offers humanity is Marcus Aurelius's relationship with time. He understood, more clearly than most, that everything passes: power, glory, joy, sorrow. Even his own life were but fleeting moments in the vast current of the universe. Yet instead of fearing decay, Marcus looked upon it with the calm gaze of understanding. He wrote, "All things will fade, only the present is real. Live fully in it." This was not an invitation to resignation, but a call to awareness. If time is all we truly have, then we must live so that each moment carries meaning. That attitude transforms Meditations from a book of philosophy into a guide on how to live, how to love, and how to accept what cannot be avoided. Marcus Aurelius saw time as a friend, not an enemy. He neither raced against it nor wished it to stop. He lived in harmony with it, knowing that every passing moment was a chance to do good, to learn, to become better. In one passage, he reminded himself, "Do not waste time debating what a good person should be. Be one." That line captures the essence of Stoic philosophy, not in speech, but in action. For Marcus, knowledge had no value unless it was lived, and true wisdom could only be found when understanding was transformed into virtue. While much of the Roman world drowned in luxury, passion, and ambition, Marcus chose a life of restraint, almost ascetic simplicity. He refused to let emotions rule him or desires cloud his reason. That did not make him cold. It made him profound. He wrote, "Tranquility does not come from having less, but from wanting less." Seen through the lens of our modern age, those words are a quiet warning to a world consumed by consumption and ambition. We have more possessions, but less peace. More information, but less wisdom. More online connections, but less human connection. Marcus never knew the internet or technology, yet he understood the root of modern misery, our inability to master our own desires. In his quiet but powerful prose, Marcus teaches that true freedom does not come from escaping rules, but from understanding oneself. Only when we are no longer enslaved by emotion, desire, or fear do we become truly free. This is freedom of the mind, a freedom no wealth or power can buy. It was this inner freedom that allowed Marcus to face life's storms without losing himself. As the empire trembled and death drew near, he remained serene, smiling gently, for he understood that everything unfolds according to nature's order. This was not surrender, it was harmony, the perfect alignment between the human soul and the universe, a state reached only by the deeply awakened. More than 2,000 years later, the world has changed, yet human anxiety remains the same. We still fear loss, crave power, and chase glory while forgetting what life truly means. That is why, when we read meditations today, we are not just reading an ancient text, we are hearing the voice of our own conscience whispering, "Happiness is not ahead of you. It is here, in this very moment." Perhaps this is the message Marcus Aurelius most wanted to leave us, that in this brief life, the only thing truly worth doing is to live in harmony with the best part of ourselves, no matter how much the world around us changes. One of Marcus Aurelius's greatest strengths was his ability to see order within chaos. He lived in a time when the world seemed to be falling apart, wars on the borders, plagues sweeping across the empire, rebellion within the court, and death lurking everywhere. Yet amid that turmoil, he maintained an almost supernatural calm. He believed that the universe is never truly chaotic. Only the human mind becomes chaotic when it fails to understand nature's order. He wrote, "The universe does nothing in vain. If you see tragedy, it is only because you have not looked far enough." In those words, Marcus did not deny pain. He showed us how to rise above it, through reason, through the understanding that everything has its place and purpose within the whole of nature. Marcus did not see life through the lens of control, but through the lens of acceptance. He never urged people to surrender, but to distinguish between what can be changed and what cannot. Be calm toward what is not yours to command, and devote your full strength to what is, he wrote. That is the essence of Stoicism, the discipline of focusing on action rather than wasting energy on what lies beyond our control. In today's hyper-connected world, where we can be distressed by events happening halfway across the planet, that lesson feels more precious than ever. It reminds us that real power does not come from controlling the world, but from mastering our reactions to it. What makes meditations eternal is that it is not merely the philosophy of an ancient Roman, but the philosophy of every human being who has ever lived. When Marcus spoke of tranquility, he was not speaking of withdrawing from the world, but of remaining calm within it. While ordinary people seek shelter from the storm, the wise build peace within their hearts. Do not wish for life to be easier. Wish to be stronger is the unspoken flame that burns through every page, guiding those lost in the darkness of life. Marcus also understood that compassion is not weakness, it is the highest form of strength. He wrote, "You were born to work with others. If you act against that, you are acting against nature. This is not a moral cliché, but a profound truth. Humanity is a web of connection, and our nature is to cooperate. When we help others, we align with nature. When we harm others, we wound ourselves. That is why Marcus, even as emperor, treated his enemies with kindness, forgave mistakes, and sought understanding over punishment. To him, goodness was not a choice. It was an instinct that must be protected if humanity is to avoid falling into darkness. Perhaps the reason Meditations continues to be loved through the centuries is that it does not speak from a pedestal, but from the heart of a man learning how to live. Marcus did not hide his weaknesses. He did not disguise his anger or his despair. He laid them bare, and in doing so, learned how to soothe them. That honesty is what makes modern readers feel so close to him. In our noisy, restless age, we too are trying to have that same conversation with ourselves. Meditations does not tell us to be saints. It tells us to keep striving to be better than we were yesterday. And in that journey, no matter how many times we fail, as long as we continue to rise, we are walking the same path Marcus Aurelius once walked, the path of light through darkness. It could be said that Meditations is not merely a work of philosophy. It is the diary of a soul relentlessly seeking peace amid storms. Each page is a dialogue between Marcus Aurelius and himself, a conversation where he is at once the teacher and the student, the judge, and the one learning to forgive. That is what makes this book timeless, because humanity, in every era, struggles with the same questions: how to keep the mind calm amid pain, how to live meaningfully in the face of mortality, how to love without losing oneself. Marcus never promised to have all the answers, but he pointed us toward a path, the path of reason, of virtue, and of compassion. In one of his most famous lines, he wrote, "Do not let what you cannot control steal your peace." That simple sentence carries immense liberating power. Most of our suffering arises from clinging to things that were never ours to control. Recognition, love, fame, or even the future. Marcus reminds us that we cannot control the wind, but we can adjust our sails. Once we understand that, we stop blaming, stop fearing, and begin using every challenge as a chance to grow. Stoicism does not make people cold, it makes them strong. It does not teach us to reject emotion, but to live peacefully with it, like a surfer who does not fear the waves, but learns to ride them. Marcus also taught that gratitude is the root of serenity. In his final years, when illness plagued him and his empire trembled, he still wrote, "I am grateful to the universe for allowing me to live, to think, to love, and to witness its beauty." A man who once commanded armies and ruled an empire found his deepest joy, not in conquest, but in the simple realization that existence itself is a miracle. That is the highest awakening, when we stop demanding that life be perfect and instead give thanks for the chance to live, to experience, and to love. In that gratitude, fear dissolves, for we see that nothing is truly lost. Everything merely changes form to return to the universe. Meditations stands as proof that philosophy is not an abstract pursuit, but the very breath of life. Marcus did not merely speak of ethics and virtue, he lived them. When loved ones died, he did not despair. When betrayed, he did not hate. When victorious, he did not boast. He treated every experience, joyful or painful, as a chance to refine his soul. While many used power to escape reality, Marcus used it to serve reality. He understood that being emperor was just a temporary role in the play of the cosmos, and that role only mattered if performed with integrity and kindness. And perhaps this is why Meditations continues to be read, loved, and quoted more than 2,000 years later. It is not advice for the perfect, but guidance for those still learning to become better. Marcus Aurelius was not a saint. He too felt anger, fatigue, and weakness. But instead of letting those moments define him, he turned them into opportunities for growth. He showed us that greatness is not in never falling, but in rising each time, with a clearer and gentler heart. That is the essence of Stoicism: strength forged through vulnerability, peace born from storms. And when we understand that, we realize that within each of us lies a sleeping Marcus Aurelius, waiting to awaken. In Meditations, Marcus Aurelius constantly reminded himself of the brevity of life. He knew that whether emperor or commoner, all share the same fate: to return to dust. Yet rather than seeing this as tragedy, he saw it as an invitation to live more meaningfully. He wrote, "Live as if you were already dead, and this is your second life." These words were not meant to instill fear, but gratitude. Only when we realize we are not eternal do we begin to cherish every breath, every moment, every person walking beside us. Marcus did not fear death. He feared living without awareness. And that, perhaps, is the sharpest warning for our time, when people are so busy, they forget they are alive. Marcus taught that every morning is a miracle. He wrote, "When you wake, remember it is nature's gift. You are still alive, still able to think, still able to love." In today's world, where mornings begin with anxiety about work, money, and expectations, those words feel like medicine for the soul. Stoicism, far from being a cold philosophy, is the art of simple living. It reminds us that peace does not come from changing the world, but from seeing it differently. Marcus did not urge us to escape reality, but to enter it with a calm heart. For only when we accept what happens can we be truly free. Throughout Meditations, Marcus often wrote about compassion, the foundation of all philosophy in his view. He said, "You were born to live with others. To harm them is to harm yourself." That insight transcends time, encapsulating the Stoic vision of the universe as a living web, where all beings are interconnected. When we do good to others, we do good to ourselves. When we sow hatred, we poison our own soul. In today's divided world, where distance between people grows even as technology connects us, that lesson is more urgent than ever. Without compassion, philosophy becomes nothing but empty words. Marcus did not believe in perfection. He knew that humans are born flawed, and our task is not to erase those flaws, but to live with them through reason. When you are angry, remember that the other person is human too, weak, mistaken, fighting his own battles, he wrote. That line makes Meditations unlike any other work of philosophy, for it is not about conquering the world, but about learning to forgive it. Forgiveness, for Marcus, was not blindness. It was the expansion of the heart that comes from understanding that everyone is on their own path. And when we understand that, our hearts grow lighter, calmer, closer to humanity. The greatest legacy Marcus Aurelius left behind was not his victories, but his example of calm and humility. He taught that a tranquil mind is the strongest fortress, one no force can breach. Empires may fall, bodies may decay, but a steady mind can stand firm amid the storm. Meditations itself is that fortress, not built of stone or iron, but of will and wisdom. And more than 2,000 years later, that fortress still stands, quietly reminding humanity that what is eternal is not power or wealth, but the human capacity to master its own soul. If we look closely at Meditations, we begin to see that beneath its calm, deliberate words lies a profound loneliness. Marcus Aurelius, though emperor of a vast and powerful empire, was still a solitary man. He could not share those reflections with anyone, for no one could fully understand the weight of being a man who wielded both the sword and the pen, fighting wars abroad while quietly battling to keep his soul from collapsing within. Meditations is, in essence, a monologue, a record of a soul struggling not to be consumed by the shadows of power. And perhaps it was in that very solitude that Marcus discovered the deepest truth, that true strength is found in the ability to stand alone, without needing the crowd to define one's worth. He once wrote, "Stand upright, not because anyone tells you to, but because you choose to." This was more than encouragement. It was the distilled essence of Stoic philosophy. It teaches that a person's worth does not come from praise or recognition, but from the ability to hold firm to one's principles, no matter the circumstances. Marcus understood that the world will always judge, always shift, and the only thing we can truly govern is our own integrity. Thus, he did not strive for perfection, but for honesty. Honesty with his own soul. That is a lesson modern humanity still struggles to learn. That freedom is not doing whatever we want, but remaining unmoved by the opinions of others. In today's world, where social media has made us live through the eyes of others, Meditations reflects the emptiness of our inner lives. People can speak to hundreds of others in a single day, yet cannot spend 5 minutes speaking with themselves. Marcus, on the other hand, spent his entire life in that conversation, with himself, in listening, adjusting, and growing. He did not need the crowd to validate his existence. He needed only self-awareness to avoid betraying his own conscience. That is why Meditations feels eternal. It is the music of silence, the sound humanity has forgotten amid the noise of ambition and fear. Marcus Aurelius also reminded us that the greater one's power, the greater one's need for compassion. He knew that strength without virtue turns destructive. While other emperors were consumed by excess and cruelty, Marcus chose the path of restraint. He constantly asked himself, is this action in harmony with nature, with reason, and with kindness? It seems a simple question, but it is the root of all moral clarity. If every person, great or small, paused to ask themselves this before acting, the world would know far less suffering. Marcus understood that kindness is not weakness. It is the highest form of power, for only the strong have the courage to be gentle. In the end, Meditations stands as proof that philosophy is not reserved for scholars. It is for anyone who wishes to live a meaningful life. Marcus was not a man who reached enlightenment in a single moment, but one who cultivated it daily, through thought, through discipline, through hardship. He never promised that life would be easy. He showed that we can become stronger because of it. That is Marcus Aurelius's greatest legacy, not the empire he ruled, not the wars he won, but a way of living. The understanding that peace is not a gift to be granted, but a practice to be earned, through patience, self-knowledge, and the quiet mastery of one's own soul. In the philosophical journey of Marcus Aurelius, one theme runs deep and eternal: his unconditional acceptance of the laws of nature. To him, the universe was a harmonious whole, where everything had its reason for being. Pain and joy, victory and loss, life and death, all were parts of a grand design beyond human comprehension. Marcus did not seek to resist fate. He sought to merge with it. He wrote, "Love your fate, amor fati." This was not surrender, but the highest expression of wisdom, to love even that which wounds us, knowing that through it we grow. That is why Meditations is not a book of despair, but one of hope, a reminder that every pain hides a lesson, and every loss can be transformed into inner strength. Marcus Aurelius believed that the universe never errs. If something causes us pain, the fault lies not in nature, but in our perception of it. If what happens is necessary for the whole, then it is necessary for me, for I am part of that whole, he wrote. That belief made him a model of serene composure. When those around him panicked, he remained calm. When the world descended into chaos, he wrote with warmth, as if in conversation with the soul of the cosmos itself. This was not indifference, but deep trust, a faith that behind every upheaval lies order, one that needs no explanation, only acceptance. And in that acceptance, Marcus found freedom. The Stoicism Marcus practiced was the art of rational surrender. It did not teach abandonment of responsibility, but the relinquishment of illusion, the illusion that we can control what was never ours to command. The moment we stop trying to bend the world to our will, we begin to feel the quiet power of stillness. Your mind will find peace, he wrote, when you stop judging and start observing. That simple sentence holds the distilled wisdom of humanity. That suffering begins when we demand the world to obey us. When we learn to observe without judgment, to accept without despair, we finally live in harmony with nature. And in that moment, everything around us, the wind, the rain, even the silence, becomes the symphony of existence. What makes Marcus Aurelius truly remarkable is that even while living in an age soaked in blood, he never lost faith in human goodness. He believed that human nature is fundamentally kind, only obscured by ignorance and fear. Thus, instead of hatred, he chose understanding. Instead of revenge, forgiveness. If someone does wrong, it is because they believe it to be right. So teach them, do not hate them. It is lines like this that make Meditations timeless. In our modern world, where judgment is often faster than compassion, Marcus reminds us that understanding is the foundation of empathy. Forgiveness is not granted because others deserve it, but because our own soul deserves freedom from the burden of hatred. And when we look back at the life of Marcus Aurelius, as emperor, philosopher, and human being, we see that Meditations is more than a book. It is proof of an eternal truth. Wisdom does not come from intellect, but from stillness. Marcus did not find peace in power, but in his ability to see the world as it truly is. Nothing more, nothing less, without distortion or judgment. He lived as a part of the universe, and when he departed, he returned to it quietly, leaving no noise behind. Everything passes, he wrote, but what is good remains in the heart of the one who lives rightly. And perhaps it is by living in this way that Marcus Aurelius became a beacon of light, a light that does not dazzle with power, but glows softly with wisdom and compassion. In Meditations, Marcus Aurelius often speaks of the stillness of the soul, a state he regarded as the pinnacle of philosophy and the source of true strength. To him, stillness was not the absence of sound, but the absence of inner conflict. A person might stand amid the clamor of battle, surrounded by swords clashing and soldiers shouting, yet remain at peace if their mind is steady. Conversely, one who lives in luxury, but is consumed by fear and restlessness, is at war within. For Marcus, stillness was mastery of the mind, a victory greater than any conquest, one without bloodshed, yet echoing through eternity. He wrote, "If you are troubled by something external, it is not the thing itself that disturbs you, but your judgment of it. And that judgment you have the power to revoke." In this single idea, Marcus redefined the nature of suffering. It does not arise from the world, but from our perception of it. That is why his Stoicism remains one of the most practical philosophies in human history. It teaches that we need not wait for the world to change to find peace. We need only change how we see it. And in that change, we find freedom. For when we realize that nothing can harm us without our consent, all external power loses its hold. Marcus believed that stillness could only be achieved when one lived in harmony with reason and nature. To him, reason was not coldness, it was the light that guided emotion. A wise soul does not suppress its feelings, it directs them toward goodness. He wrote, "Love without attachment. Live among men without being swept away by them." That balance is the essence of Stoicism, to live fully in the world, yet remain true to oneself. In contrast to those who seek peace by escaping reality, Marcus taught that real tranquility is found only when we dare to face life's storms with clarity of mind and gentleness of heart. What is most remarkable is that, despite living amid political turmoil, Marcus Aurelius never lost faith in humanity. He saw greed, betrayal, and cruelty, yet responded with compassion instead of contempt. He wrote, "When someone errs, do not be angry. Remember that you too have erred." In our modern age, where people judge one another in an instant, often through the flicker of a screen, this lesson rings with renewed urgency. Forgiveness, Marcus reminds us, is not weakness, but wisdom. Only those who understand the fragility of the human condition can truly love it. Perhaps that is why history remembers Marcus Aurelius as the Emperor of the Soul. He ruled not merely through law, but through example. He proved that a ruler need not be harsh to be respected, but fair to be beloved. In an age when power so often meant cruelty, Marcus chose kindness. He never let the crown overshadow his humanity. Instead, he let humanity ennoble the crown. And that is why Meditations endures, not merely as philosophy for philosophers, but as a compass for anyone who seeks to live with virtue in an imperfect world. When Marcus Aurelius spoke of virtue, he did not treat it as an abstract concept, but as the only foundation upon which a meaningful life could stand. To him, virtue was not something to boast about. It was a compass guiding every small action in life. He wrote, "No one can prevent you from being honest, kind, calm, and humble. If you lose these things, the fault is your own." The line seems simple, yet it contains immense power, the power of self-responsibility, something the modern world often forgets. Marcus believed that virtue is never dictated by circumstance. It lies within our own choices. Betrayed, we can still be honest. Insulted, we can still be kind. Broken, we can still be courageous. For virtue is not a reaction, it is essence. In Meditations, virtue is the anchor that keeps a person steady in life's turbulent currents. For Marcus, everything else, fame, wealth, status, was smoke and shadow. The only thing real was the character of the soul. He wrote, "If you lose your gold, you lose wealth. If you lose your reputation, you lose an image. But if you lose your virtue, you lose yourself." And perhaps that is the great tragedy of modern humanity. We learn how to succeed, but forget how to live rightly. Meditations, therefore, is not just a philosophical text, but a warning. Without virtue, all achievements are hollow. What made Marcus truly exceptional was that he did not merely speak of ethics, he lived them. Philosophy to him was not a refuge, but a call to action. When his court was divided, he chose patience. When wars broke out, he chose compassion. When betrayed, he chose forgiveness. He understood that doing the right thing does not always lead to reward, but it is the only thing that lets us meet ourselves with dignity. "Do not ask what others should be like," he wrote. "Be that person." In our modern age, where everyone wants to speak but few wish to act, his words ring like a bell of awakening. True worth lies not in what we preach, but in what we practice. Marcus also reminded us that virtue and compassion are inseparable. He believed that wisdom without kindness is cold, and kindness without wisdom is blind. The Stoic philosophy he followed sought harmony between these two forces, strength and gentleness, action and understanding. He once said, "Be like an open hand, ready to help, but never clenching tight." It is a beautiful image of compassion. To give without expectation, to love without possession. That is what made Marcus the ideal ruler, a man of power who never lost his humanity. Perhaps that is why, more than 2,000 years later, Meditations remains one of the most powerful guides to personal ethics ever written. It does not preach like scripture or promise reward. It simply reveals a timeless truth. Living rightly is its own reward. When we are honest with ourselves, we need no witness. When we act with goodness, we need no applause. Marcus Aurelius lived by those principles, and for that reason, he became immortal. Not in monuments or marble, but in the minds of those still striving to be good in a world that often forgets how. When we read Meditations, we realize that Marcus Aurelius did not write to comfort others. He wrote to keep himself from collapsing under the weight of darkness. Each page is a conversation between reason and despair, between the desire to control and the courage to let go. He lived through an age of chaos, endless wars, devastating plagues, and political revolts that threatened the very heart of the Roman Empire. Amid all this turmoil, he carried the unbearable burden of being emperor. Yet instead of letting power consume him, he chose to write, to think, to reflect, to face his fears with ink and thought. For Marcus, the greatest victory was never conquering enemies, but mastering the mind. He understood that if one could not rule one's thoughts, even the throne itself could not save one from suffering. In Meditations, he reminded himself, life is not what happens to you, but how you respond to it. That is the essence of Stoicism, the philosophy of self-mastery and awareness. Marcus did not try to change fate. He changed how he perceived it. He taught that pain is not an enemy, but a stern teacher that helps us grow. A man who lived amid storms knew better than anyone that peace cannot be found outside. It must be cultivated within, through resilience, through reason, and through gratitude, even for what we do not wish for. That is why every line of Meditations feels like a declaration. Even if the world collapses, the soul can still stand firm. What sets Marcus apart from other philosophers is that he did not live in an ivory tower, but in a world of blood and dust. He wrote about tranquility, not because he was spared from chaos, but because he had walked through it and preserved his humanity. When enemies surrounded his borders, when death loomed near, he still wrote of kindness, forgiveness, and harmony with the cosmos. It was not naive optimism. It was a profound faith that human dignity can survive even in the darkest of times. That faith made Marcus the symbol of a different kind of power, the power of compassion and self-control, weapons no empire could ever take from him. In our modern world, driven by speed, noise, and pressure, Marcus Aurelius's philosophy is more relevant than ever. We no longer fight with swords, but we battle anxiety, stress, and the haunting sense of meaninglessness. Each of us carries an invisible battlefield within, where reason clashes with emotion, where kindness is tested by anger, where faith wavers before fear. And in those moments, Meditations becomes a lantern in the night. It cannot erase the world's darkness, but it can light the path for the soul. It reminds us that we cannot control the wind, only how we set our sails. Perhaps that is why, more than 2,000 years later, people still turn to Marcus Aurelius, not as a king, but as a companion of the spirit. Meditations does not promise wealth or success. It simply shows us how to live without losing ourselves in a world that never stops changing. It teaches that even in failure, loss, misunderstanding, or solitude, we can still choose to respond with calmness and kindness. And when we do, we discover not just peace, but our true self, one not defined by status or fear, but by stillness and understanding. As Marcus wrote, "No one can hurt you unless your mind allows it." Among the pages of Meditations, Marcus Aurelius returns again and again to one central truth: all things are impermanent. He viewed the world through the eyes of a man who understood that nothing lasts forever, neither triumph nor defeat, neither sorrow nor joy. Everything passes, like waves following one another upon the sea, he wrote. Yet instead of breeding despair, this insight opened the door to profound freedom. When we grasp that everything is fleeting, we no longer cling to it. We can savor joy without fearing its loss, and face pain without surrendering to despair. That is the strength of Stoicism, the strength that comes not from escaping reality, but from understanding it. Marcus believed that the greatest source of human suffering is the illusion of permanence. We grieve because we think happiness will last forever. We fear because we believe sadness will never end. But he knew that everything, even life itself, is merely a small part of the vast, flowing rhythm of the universe. Look to the past, he wrote. Countless empires have risen and vanished. Countless souls have loved, hated, dreamed, and all have faded into forgetfulness. You too shall pass. So why worry over trifles? The question is not meant to belittle life, but to awaken awareness. If death is inevitable, then the real tragedy is not dying, but never having truly lived. Meditations is not the lament of a lonely emperor. It is the prayer of a soul seeking harmony with the order of the cosmos. Marcus did not write to complain. He wrote to remind himself to love what is, even knowing it will disappear. For him, real love does not lie in possession, but in appreciation. He wrote, "When you kiss your child, remember that it may be gone tomorrow. Yet that thought should not make you love it less, but more." Within that reflection lies the Stoic understanding of love and death, two sides of the same coin. Only by realizing that something can be lost do we truly learn to love it. What makes Marcus's vision extraordinary is his simplicity. While many philosophers describe the cosmos with lofty abstraction, Marcus spoke of it with quiet wonder. He would gaze at the night sky, see the stars, and remember that he too was part of them. You came from the universe, and you will return to the universe, he wrote. To him, death was not an end, but a reunion. Like a drop of dew falling back into the ocean, that view freed him from fear, allowing him to see death not as an enemy, but as a natural rhythm of existence. In our modern world, so terrified of loss, his voice still whispers, "Do not fear the end, for it is what makes everything precious." And it was this acceptance that made Marcus Aurelius a symbol of serenity in the face of death. He never begged for a longer life, nor sought to escape his fate. When illness overtook him, he continued to write, to reflect, to give thanks for the gift of being alive, to have loved, to have learned, to have been human. Death for him was the final teacher. the one who reveals that the only thing we truly carry with us is a soul refined by reason and compassion. And when the moment came, Marcus did not tremble. He smiled, knowing he had lived fully, as a man, nothing more, nothing less. In the final pages of Meditations, Marcus Aurelius no longer writes as an emperor, but as a man preparing to leave the world, speaking quietly to his own soul. His tone becomes light as air, clear as water, stripped of any ambition for victory or longing for glory. He writes only to let go, to release, one by one, the chains of power, fear, and attachment to the fragile body he inhabited. You brought nothing into this world, and you will take nothing out. Let all things come and go like breath, he says. These are the words of one who has seen through the futility of struggle, not through theory, but through a lifetime lived between the heights of power and the depths of solitude. Marcus Aurelius lived a life of paradox, a ruler of the known world, yet a man who never felt he belonged to it. He knew that the throne could not guarantee peace, just as wealth could not protect the soul from emptiness. Thus, Meditations became a journey inward, a search for self beneath the layers of fame and duty. He asked himself, "Who am I when all titles are gone?" The question still echoes today, in an age where identity is defined by jobs, screens, and things that can vanish overnight. Marcus reminds us that true worth lies not in how others see us, but in how we see ourselves when the world grows silent. If we can meet our own eyes at the end of the day and feel at peace, that is the greatest achievement of all. One reason Meditations endures is its radical honesty. Marcus never pretends to be perfect. He admits his anger, his fatigue, his disappointments with himself and with humanity. Yet instead of letting those weaknesses consume him, he recorded them as a witness of his own imperfection. "Today I was angry," he writes, "but tomorrow I will try again. No one can stop me from being better than I was yesterday." 2 millennia later, those words still move readers, because they come not from a saint or a distant philosopher, but from a man struggling, as we all do, to live rightly despite his flaws. Marcus understood that perfection is unreachable, but striving toward it ennobles the soul. "You need not be perfect," he wrote, "only less ignorant than you were yesterday." It is a small sentence, yet large enough to live by. In a world obsessed with flawless images, beauty, success, achievement, Marcus's wisdom reminds us that peace comes not from judgment, but from acceptance. The Stoic path is not about rejecting imperfection, but about learning to love the imperfect self and refine it with patience. And perhaps that is why Meditations continues to be read, quoted, and cherished after more than 2,000 years. It does not teach us to be cold, but to be compassionate through understanding. It does not ask us to abandon the world, but to live in it without being consumed by it. It does not promise immortality, but shows us how to live so that when death comes, we have nothing to regret. Marcus Aurelius did not write to be worshipped. He wrote to be understood. And because of that, he became a quiet teacher for countless souls, those who, amid the noise of the modern world, still return to the stillness of a philosopher-emperor who once wrote for himself, "All things will pass, but the soul that lives rightly will never fade." As Meditations draws to a close, it feels as though Marcus Aurelius is no longer writing for himself alone, but for all who would come after him, those still wrestling with humanity's oldest questions. Who am I? Why am I here? How can I remain at peace in a chaotic world? Though he never meant his reflections for publication, his words have transcended centuries, languages, and cultures to reach the modern heart. For what he wrote did not belong to a single era. It belonged to the human condition itself, to our fears and hopes, our confusion and longing to live a life of meaning. Meditations is not just a book. It is a mirror for the human soul, where each reader can glimpse a reflection of their own. Marcus Aurelius taught that wisdom is not in knowing many things, but in deeply understanding simple ones. All things are alike. They come and they go, he wrote. But you can choose how to see them. This is the essence of Stoicism. We cannot control the world, but we can control our response to it. And in that choice lies true freedom. Freedom is not the absence of constraint, but the mastery of one's own mind. In an age where people mistake noise for freedom, bound by emotions, technology, and public opinion, Marcus's voice rings out like a bell of awakening. Real power lies not in domination, but in self-command. He once wrote, "If you are offended, remember, it is you who have chosen to be offended." This is not a call to apathy, but an invitation to awareness. Marcus teaches us to treat emotions like flowing water. Allow them to pass without resistance or surrender. Observe them with reason, as the moon reflects on a still river without disturbing its surface. That is the art of calm, the art humanity still struggles to master. In today's world of instant reactions and endless noise, Meditations whispers the opposite. Slow down, breathe, listen. Remember that nothing outside can break a person who stands firm within. Marcus Aurelius also left a profound lesson on responsibility. He never fled his duty, even under the crushing weight of empire. He understood that philosophy is not an escape from life, but a way to live it more fully. Do what is right, and let all else follow its course, he wrote, a principle he upheld until his final breath. Surrounded by war, rebellion, and plague, he never lost faith in humanity. That faith made him the ideal kind of ruler, one who led not through fear, but through understanding. In an age fractured by division, his legacy reminds us, power means nothing without compassion and humility. Yet perhaps the greatest lesson Marcus Aurelius bequeathed to humankind is the lesson of stillness. In a world intoxicated by noise, he taught the value of silence. The silence where the mind stops arguing, the soul stops searching, and one simply is. You will find peace, he wrote, when you stop comparing and start living. That line drifts through time like a soft Roman breeze, reaching our hurried century with undiminished truth. For no matter how modern we become, we all share the same yearning: to be calm, to be understood, to live rightly. And Meditations remains the path, the quiet, timeless path that leads us home to the simplest, deepest, most eternal truth of all: peace within the soul. And so, when Meditations comes to its end, we realize that Marcus Aurelius left humanity not merely a work of philosophy, but a map of the soul, a guide by which each person might find their way back to themselves. More than 2,000 years have passed. The world has changed beyond recognition, yet his words remain alive with power. For every age has known war, fear, and confusion. And yet, just as Marcus once sat beneath the cold night of a military tent, writing about kindness and composure, so too can we find light amid the noise of the modern world, by returning to the eternal values of reason, compassion, and self-mastery. These may seem small, but they are the true foundations of peace. For peace does not begin with treaties or governments. It begins with a single calm soul. The Stoic philosophy, Marcus Aurelius embodied, does not urge us to become cold or detached, but to love wisely. He never told us to extinguish emotion, but to understand it, to master it so that it no longer rules us. In a world of constant temptation, he reminded us that happiness does not depend on what we have, but on how we see what we have. You can live happily right now if you choose to, he wrote. The simplicity of that sentence conceals a revolutionary truth. Happiness is not a reward, but a choice. The choice to live in harmony with nature, to act with virtue, and to accept what lies beyond our control. If we listen closely, we hear that Meditations is not only about Marcus, but about all of us. Fragile beings searching for meaning in the vastness of existence. He wrote about how to be human in an imperfect world, and in doing so, he gave us faith that imperfection itself is where the soul is tested and refined. Without suffering, how would we cherish joy? Without loss, how would we grasp the value of the present? Without death, how would we ever learn to live? Meditations does not teach us to flee the darkness. It teaches us to carry light into it, the light of kindness, wisdom, and serenity. Today, as the world once again trembles with uncertainty, wars, division, and fear of the future, Marcus Aurelius's philosophy feels more relevant than ever. He reminds us that though times change, human nature does not. We remain frail, yearning, fearful, yet also capable of love, forgiveness, and transcendence. We cannot control the tide of history, but we can control how we move within it. We cannot stop the storm, but we can learn to steer our ship through it. And in that simple act, in choosing to live rightly, kindly, and consciously, we find the only freedom that truly matters, the kind no force can ever take away. Thus, the greatest legacy of Marcus Aurelius is not the throne he sat upon, nor the empire he ruled, but the inspiration he left behind, the belief that every human being can live better. Meditations is the message of a soul who understood that even if the world collapses, our humanity can still save it. It is the voice of reason amid the storm of emotion, the small lamp burning through the long night of history, the gentle call for each of us to become the guardian of our own soul. For if every person can keep peace within, the world will know less chaos. If each of us can live with compassion and wisdom, humanity will find its light again. And as Marcus wrote in the final lines of his life, all things will pass, but what is good will endure, so long as human beings still choose to live for one another.